Enterprises for a long time have struggled to govern their unstructured data. So when I say unstructured data, this is content that may live on users' local devices. It may live in the cloud, in Microsoft 365, in Box, in other cloud storage providers. And you have this distributed content problem that may not be, it may not be labeled correctly, it may not be classified correctly, it may not be permissioned and controlled correctly, which I think organizations have tolerated that unstructured content governance problem for a long time because the blast radius was limited. We were talking about humans accessing that content, not agents. Now, as we're starting to talk about agents accessing that content on such a large scale, that problem becomes much more critical to solve. Let me start with an example, right? If a human is, let's say the legal team is working on a deal, a new partnership deal that's material non-public information. They have this data in their folders. It's not classified appropriately. Access isn't properly controlled. A human that's not supposed to have access may not find that data because they're not looking for it, right? But let's say the product team is now using an agent to go research that same company that the legal team's doing a deal with. And now that agent is taking the data, it's surfacing it to the product team, it's creating roadmaps, it's actually acting on that knowledge. Now you've got a really big problem that most likely would not have existed if it was just humans needing to access this content. Agents will go access whatever content they can to try to solve the problem. And the blast radius is just much bigger when you're working with agents. Permissions of these agents are often very vast because they need to do multiple step processes, right? So that a lot of times the agents don't have those restrictive permissions within them, which is why it's so important to have those restrictive permissions on your content and to have that content classified. So this is one thing that I get really excited about because AI can actually help us here too. It's not just part of the problem, it's part of the solution. So I think one thing that organizations have really struggled with is the data classification piece. It's really hard to do that manually, and it's really hard to get humans to go in and properly classify data, especially when you're talking years and years and years of unstructured content. So AI can actually help us classify that content, not just based on keywords or regexes like historical DLP solutions have provided security teams in the past, but AI can actually understand what the content is, how sensitive the content is, and it can proactively put those labels on the content for us and automatically apply permissions based on what it thinks the content is. So this is a great example of, yes, AI causes some security challenges, but it can also help be part of the solution to those. You're not creating copies of the data. What you're doing is you can have an agent that actually reads and understands what's in the document, and then it can apply a label to that content. And then once that content actually has a label attached to it, it can flow with it wherever it goes, right? Because you want the content to stay classified no matter where it's going across your systems. And then you can apply whatever controls you deem appropriate. So let's say you have a document that you labeled as sensitive. Let's say it's your most restrictive setting. You can apply really strict permissions. You can say, we don't want this to be shared with anyone outside of the organization. We don't want this to be shared publicly. And you can apply those strict access controls based on the classification labels. There's a lot of compliance requirements out there that want you to have strict controls over access to sensitive data. and this helps you do that. If you don't know what data you have or where it's sitting and it's not properly classified, it's really difficult to say that you're controlling that data appropriately. Yes, that's another great benefit as well. I think one of the struggles of agents when you have distributed content, it means the context is also distributed. So agents do better work when they have more context to work from. And if that context is distributed across multiple systems, the agent may have access to one system but not another. It may be working from different, not a complete picture of the context that it needs. So, when you're doing this, with how we've historically used AI as an assistant, it may surface a bad answer, it may surface an incomplete answer, a hallucination, something you're not permissioned to see. But I think we're talking about a whole new level of risk when you're looking at agents operating with that, because an agent will go one step further and then take action based on that data, even if it's missing the context. Yes, that is very real, and I think all of the security leaders that I speak with on a regular basis are working actively to try to solve this problem. So I think as security leaders and practitioners, it's really important for us to not to say no to AI. I think we have to equip people with the tools that they need to do their jobs in a secure, safe manner. Otherwise, they're going to go around it and you're going to have the shadow AI problem. No matter how hard you try to control it, people will find ways to use these tools to make them more productive. And I think, here at Box, that's one thing that's very important for us is we need people to use AI. We want them to be productive. We want them to be better at their jobs. And we just want to make sure they do it securely. So I think it's really important to provide safe ways for teams to experiment and determine, if these tools are really useful before we go on and fully implement them. Yes, it's a very real challenge, especially, when you have large organizations, they have, 40, 50, 100 years even of content. It's where do we start? And I think another thing AI can really help with is, archiving content that's no longer relevant. Because you don't need agents to go back and probably search, 100 years worth of content, nor do you want to try to classify 100 years worth of content. So I think you have to figure out what's really critical. I think, in reality, it's really difficult to put all of your content into a single place, but it's easier if you can do that and you can have better control, better context, better governance if all or most of your content is in a single content layer. Yes, so I think human oversight becomes really important for critical actions. Again, the blast radius for agents across your context or across your content is much bigger than it is for humans. When agents are operating, like in the example I mentioned at the beginning, going back to the legal team having some very sensitive non-public information for a deal they're working, if an agent is grabbing that and acting on it and taking that information, putting it into maybe a product roadmap, slacking product leaders about this new information it's found, your blast radius just gets so much bigger. So I think having a human in the loop for these types of sensitive actions really is still necessary. Now, there's going to be some low-risk things as we start to get more comfortable with agents that we're going to let them do on their own because we're comfortable with the controls over our content and we're comfortable with the guardrails that we have in place for the agents. But there's going to be some actions that are so sensitive, such as deleting whole files, sharing whole folders publicly, that we may still want humans in the loop for. Yeah, I would say start by knowing where all of your content is. And as much as you can, putting all of that content in a single storage location, so you have all of your context and controls and governance in a single plane. And then once you do that, it's understanding what data you have, what the sensitivity is, classifying it, applying those labels. And again, AI can help us do that in a way that is actually feasible now. If we were relying on humans to do that, that's a project that would take years for security compliance teams to oversee. So now we can do that much more quickly. And then once you have the data classified, making sure you apply controls based on those classifications. So you may want to restrict permissions, you may want to restrict file sharing, you may want to restrict agent access to that content. And then once you feel like you have a very strong and secure content layer, then you can talk about agents operating on that content, and then thinking about guardrails you need to have in place for those agents to detect maybe behavioral drifts and where they might misalign from their original intent, or where they might be accessing something that maybe we don't want them to access.